Well, hello, listeners. Welcome to Swords, Sorcery, and Synthesizers. My name's Ben Orchard. I'm coming to you from Adelaide.
And I'm Claire Fitzpatrick and coming to you from Brisbane.
And every now and then we talk over the phone about fantasy movies of the 80s. We look beyond the nostalgia to see what is the key to their enduring appeal. We have only 3 rules with regards to what we cover on this podcast. Number 1, it has to have been made in the 80s. Number 2, it has to have some kind of supernatural or fantastical element that defies rational explanation. And number 3, we have to both find it entertaining. Because we're not getting paid for this, are we, Claire?
Sadly not.
Life is too short to talk about boring movies.
Yes.
We hope you find it as entertaining to listen to us, talk about these movies as we did watching them. Well now, Claire, last night you watched The Hunger.
Yes. Very interesting movie.
Now, I think we're coming to another one of those episodes where we're talking about a movie that I look back upon with a certain, rose-tinted nostalgia for my lost youth, whereas it's something that you've only recently discovered, and you're probably approaching it with somewhat more sensible, critical perspective than I am. And
I don't know about sensible.
well, funnily enough, the last time we did that was with a film called Labyrinth, another movie starring David Bowie.
Mhm.
I described that movie as something of a guilty pleasure of mine. And yeah, oh boy, when it comes to guilty pleasures, I think The Hunger is one of the movies that I feel the most guiltiest about.
Well, you should. Joking. I am very interested to hear about your opinion because I have a very interesting take on this film. And I can really see why it has stuck with you all these years. It's pretty cool.
Well, can we start by just me telling you why I feel a bit guilty about liking this film?
Yeah.
Because there are a number of reasons. First of all, you've noticed generally on this podcast, I've tried to separate the art from the artist. I generally don't comment on the personal lives of an artist or their belief system. Unless it's
Mhm.
some way reflected in their work, I usually don't find such things relevant.
Mm.
But I know there's a lot of debate with regards to, supporting living artists who have problematic views. Because, by purchasing their art, by, buying these products, you're sort of enabling their lifestyle at least.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot easier to, you know, read a novel by Edgar Allan Poe or H.P. Lovecraft because, they've been dead for years and you know that you're not supporting any of their bad behavior by, purchasing it from a bookstore. The thing is, The Hunger is based upon a novel by Whitley Strieber. And have you heard much about him, Claire?
I have never heard of him.
Maybe that's for the best because it meant that when you watched The Hunger, you could approach it with fresh eyes. You could appreciate it just as a piece of storytelling. Whitley Strieber, started out as a sort of New York Times best-selling horror novelist. The Hunger was one of his bestsellers. Another famous one was Wolfen. But his career took a sudden sort of left turn when he decided to write non-fiction books about his encounters with the supernatural.
So when you say non-fiction,
Yeah,
what do you mean by that?
the non-fiction status is a bit contested. In 1987, he wrote a book called Communion, which told about how he was abducted by aliens.
Okay, Mulder.
I mean, more recently, he's written a book called The Afterlife Revolution, which he claims to have co-written with his dead wife, who he has been communicating with telepathically.
For telling her to do the dishes? Telepathically.
Oh, there's another book that he wrote in the 90s called The Secret School, where he claimed that he had recovered memories of past lives, including past lives in Atlantis and past lives in ancient Rome, where he was a tutor to Octavian before he became emperor.
I can definitely believe that.
And yeah, in the early 2000s, he wrote a book called The Key, in which he claimed that some kind of angel or prophet or spiritual messenger approached him in a hotel and outlined a holy philosophy to him and explained how how it's possible to develop your mind to be capable of various different types of psychic powers.
I just had this vision of like Moses sitting on the hill, with the commandments. Is that just him there, standing there with all these tips chiseled out?
Well, supposedly this prophet or this messenger of God approached Whitley Strieber at a hotel when he was on a book tour. And and he's written a book about the Roswell incident as well.
Of course. Yep.
So yeah, he has a lot of unconventional beliefs, and these are sort of I don't know, overshadowed his career as a writer of fiction.
I think there is, without going into too much detail, there are a lot of people who that happens to, especially now when the personal life mix it up their fiction, their writing, and what happens can be a very weird mixed soup of interesting things.
Okay, the reason that I mention this in relation to The Hunger is that one reason I'm inclined to be a bit skeptical of Whitley Strieber's subsequent work is that in a lot of these books that he's written, like supernatural entities, they share some deep philosophy with Strieber, which he passes on to the world. And sometimes I've noticed that these sort of otherworldly entities are quoting Whitley Strieber's early horror fiction. There's a quote that appears in The Hunger. It's not in the movie, but it's in the novel. And variations of it appear in The Secret School and The Key. I mean, this philosophical quote is, love your enemy, for without him, you will never taste the flavor of victory.
That's pretty cool. That is really cool.
Yeah, well, it's so cool that, he kept repeating it after it had first appeared in The Hunger. I mean, it appeared in all these other supposedly non-fiction books that he's, written since.
That's really cool, but he just sounds like such an odd person. Fascinating. Just so odd.
Well, that's the sort of ethical dilemma of supporting someone like him, but, purchasing his novels. You ask yourself, is this guy a fruitcake? Is he a con man? I mean, I'm sure that there are some people out there who, think that he's totally on the level.
Yeah. But I think that's also like you're biased towards what they're saying. What he's saying, what, people who are outspoken are saying, and again, as we say, separate the art from the artist. But this guy, he's pretty out there.
In any case, I brought the novel The Hunger, and I've read it a few times. It's quite a gripping page turner. And I sort of justified it to myself by saying, well, he wrote this before, going off the deep end, all this sort of woo-woo stuff. Well, okay, that's the first reason why I consider The Hunger something of a guilty pleasure. The novel is quite interesting in that it sort of tells a couple of stories in parallel to each other.
Yep.
I mean, the first story is about this centuries-old vampire who tends to discard her lovers after every 300 years or so.
Mhm.
because when she transforms, another human being into a vampire, the
Mhm.
power of the blood dilutes after centuries. So they, they live for centuries, like forever young.
Yeah.
And then, after a few hundred years, they start to decay and they're left this sort of living husk of a thing, which
Mhm.
she keeps, like, morbidly keeps like a collection of them in boxes in her attic.
I mean, Mary Shelley kept, Percy's heart, so, you know, not that morbid.
Yeah, but it wasn't a living heart. In the main sort of present day plot, this vampire, whose name is Miriam Blaylock, approaches a scientist named Sarah Roberts, who's doing experiments with chimps to sort of slow the aging process down.
Mhm.
And she's looking for, I guess, a cure for her current lover, John, to sort of prolong his life.
Yeah.
But she sort of loses interest in sort of prolonging John's life and thinks, oh, this scientist is really hot. I could groom her to be like my next lover for the next 300 years. Um,
I was so shocked by that. 'Cause I was like, "Oh my god," her and John, so romantic, this, like, undying love, and then I was like, alright, she's just gonna ditch him, get a girlfriend." Like, "Okay then, you do you."
it's worse in the novel because the novel contains all of these extensive flashbacks going back hundreds of years
Mm,
through Miriam's life, like going back to like ancient Egypt,
mhm.
uh, up until like the present day of the like early 1980s when the book was written.
Yeah.
So it has a sort of epic quality to it. Uh,
Mhm.
the film, on the other hand, is pretty much focused just on the events in the present day.
Yeah.
And one reason I guess the film is something of a guilty pleasure is, like, I realized that a lot of compromises had to be made to get it into a 2-hour length. And I can understand why sort of literary purists, like, and like hardcore fans of Strieber's novel, like, weren't completely happy with it, because
Mhm.
it is a very condensed version of the story.
Yeah. And I can kind of see that. So, obviously, I haven't read the book or anything like that, but one of my main not a criticism, but I kind of thought this is a much bigger story than this movie. And I was just like, there are so many things that are unsaid, and I think maybe that's one of the things that people, you know, didn't think it was great. But yeah, like knowing that there's a book and a history and a backstory makes so much sense when you watch the movie.
I think the fact that The Hunger was made in the 1980s before the age of, like, prestige television, when
Mm.
there was kind of a trade-off that had to be made when you were adapting books to visual media.
Yeah.
Either you adapt it for television and you're left with something that has a much lower budget and sort of cheaper looking production values, but has the space to sort of develop the characters and, expand upon the story.
Mm.
Or else you go with a feature film where you have to condense the story significantly, but it has the
Mm.
production values and the lush visuals to sort of, I don't know, convey all the spectacle that the novel implies.
Yeah. And I can definitely see that. Like the visuals was was just gorgeous. Like it's a very gorgeous movie. But I can definitely see that it it really was like making sure that it was visually beautiful. Like it seemed to be really focusing on that as well, because obviously it can't tell the entire story. Like it can't tell the whole backstory. So I really thought like I wasn't sure. I was like, are they playing up the visuals, focusing on that because maybe the script isn't that good or because the story isn't that fleshed out? So I wasn't sure, but
I think it's
yeah.
a question I think it's a question of compromise that had to be made with the way that the industry was in the 1980s. I think
Yeah.
I think that if The Hunger was adapted, to the screen today, it would probably be like a longer form Netflix series or something.
Yeah.
And with a, streaming service like, Netflix or Hulu or Stan or Amazon Prime or whatever, they wouldn't have to compromise. They could do something that, is long, but at the same time has the kind of, high quality production values
Yeah.
that would be the equal of the 80s film.
Yeah. And I think that would be so good with this film. And I think it would make it such an amazing TV show, an amazing series, because it could pull out, all the really cool things about this and actually expand on it. Like it's gorgeous. And what's her last name? Catherine, I can't pronounce her last name. Is it
Oh,
Delvaux?
the lead actress, Catherine Deneuve.
Yeah. Deneuve. I think, Catherine Deneuve and David Bowie as like they're two of the best cinematic vampires. Can you like in my opinion, can you imagine if it was like longer and the audience had more time to sort of like see their love and their relationship because they were so captivating. I could totally believe them as, a couple. So yeah. Definitely think if this was made now and there was, so much more room to develop that, I think it would have worked so much better. And people wouldn't, it would be loved.
Yeah, well, that's another thing you just reminded me of. At the end of the movie, uh, the character of Miriam Blaylock, the one that Catherine Deneuve plays, uh, she is punished, for her evil deeds. Um, ends up, essentially buried alive in a coffin, and the woman that she intended to sort of, I don't know, make into her thrall has actually taken her power for herself.
Yeah.
In the novel, the reverse happens. Miriam survives,
Okay.
and Whitley Strieber wrote a couple of sequels.
Mhm.
The Last Vampire and Lilith's Dream. In 2001 and 2003, I think he wrote those books.
Mhm.
So yes, if someone wanted to turn The Hunger into like a Netflix streaming series today, there's plenty of material to go with.
Because that'd be really cool because I think they're such an interesting backstory and I wanted to know so much more about them. And yeah, I think the movie was great in a way of introducing us to these characters. It just made me want more. I just wanted to know more about them, more about who they were as people, as a couple, and more about their house. Where do all these things come from? They talk about going to all these places and getting all these, objects and items and talismans, and I just wanted to know everything about it.
Well, you bring up one of the things that I like about the movie, even though
Mhm.
it doesn't have enough screen time to fully develop, these characters whose lives, are centuries old.
Hmm.
It has, it finds various different ways to hint at their heritage. Uh,
Yeah.
I like the fact that when they are preying upon uh, various people, like there's an opening scene where they go to a nightclub and they, pick up a couple of people and then, drive them back to their house and feast upon them. They're not piercing their neck in a usual way. They have these ankh-shaped pendants, the ankh being an ancient Egyptian symbol,
Yeah.
and there's a knife concealed in it, and that's how they, make cuts in their victims to sort of drink their blood. And you mentioned their house, like it's full of all these exotic antiques from all over the world, from
Mhm.
the places they've traveled.
Yeah, like it like with the Addams family and their houses, museum. It made me think of something like that, but more, gothic and creepy because it's like, who knows what would be in there? Who knows what you'd find in there? I just thought it was like a treasure trove. And there were some points where like I paused it and I was actually looking at all the little things. And I just wanted to know more about that. That was really cool. It just, yeah, I think their house was something that actually pulled me in and made me like more interested in who they were as characters because who are they to have all these relics, items, and yeah, it just made me more intrigued.
What it reminded me of was another movie from the 80s about immortal beings, Highlander. Uh,
Mhm.
in that case, it's focused more on a benevolent immortal, but he runs an antique store, and his house is full of like all of these odd trinkets that he's collected from his travels around the world.
Mm.
It as a sort of similar vibe to it. you bring up all these little tiny visual details that you can like pause the movie and you can see all these little background, details. It's probably one reason why I've kept coming back to this movie again and again and again.
Mm.
Visual aesthetic is so rich and so detailed, and
Yeah.
such thought has gone into the tiniest like placement of props within like the sets and the sets, the costume design, the cinematography.
Yeah.
And I think it's a testament to the director, Tony Scott, who I think is kind of underrated as a craftsman in
Yeah.
terms of being a visual craftsman, probably because the films that he chose to make were generally, not that intelligent on a script level. Uh, The Hunger was the first film that he did after, honing his skills directing like TV commercials. And it's sort of a erotic horror film. It has quite a languid pace. It's quite, I guess, artsy, you could say. It is very different to the films that he made after that. The Hunger was not a box office success, so sort of switched gears dramatically with his next film, Top Gun, which was, a very sort of it was this testosterone-fueled action movie. And it sort of set the pace for his subsequent career, where most of his films were action movies and crime thrillers. Probably the most acclaimed of these was Crimson Tide, about a mutiny on a nuclear submarine, and he also did a film that was written by Quentin Tarantino, a sort of outlaw couple on the run action comedy called True Romance.
Mhm. I find that so interesting because that seems like such a departure to this film. This film and, like, the aesthetic of the film is completely different to all these other action things, and it's so interesting that he made this, like yeah, like, it's actually beautiful, and I love the use of color in it, like, it's amazing, and everything just stands out, and there are parts where it's so garish, but then, yeah, there is that really dark kind of beauty to it. And I just if you had said, "Yeah, this person here who made this film made Top Gun," I'd be like, "No, they didn't." What do you mean? I find that's actually it's really interesting, and it shows, like, how he grew as a filmmaker, um, and just the technical abilities that he has.
But that's
This really cool.
But that's the thing, I think during his lifetime, like, even the subsequent action films that he did, like Top Gun and
Mhm.
Crimson Tide, have the same level of visual detail to them. It's just
Yeah.
applied to a very different kind of storyline. And, Tony Scott was the brother of, Ridley Scott,
Mhm.
another director, probably best known for Alien, Blade Runner, and Gladiator, who has,
Mhm.
much the same sort of fine attention to detail in the visuals of his films, but enjoyed more critical acclaim because he usually, I don't know, gravitated towards better scripts, it must be said. But the two brothers, there was a time in the late '90s where they'd both made enough money between them on successful films that they could start up their own production company called Scott Free Productions, and they actually did a Hunger TV series.
Ah,
And
that's cool.
the TV series is not directly based on the book, and it's not directly based upon any other works by Whitley Strieber either.
Mhm.
The only connection that it has is basically being filmed in the same style as The Hunger. It's, it's really an anthology series, like each episode is its own separate story. It's kind of like, The Twilight Zone or The Outer Limits.
That
Only
sounds cool.
Only with a lot more sex
Yes.
and with, David Bowie as the host. He's not playing the same character, he's playing a different character, a sort of ghostly mad artist.
Okay, I'm gonna have to watch this. You just intrigued me so much. I am hooked.
Well,
And I wanted more of Bowie in this movie. So that means I get more of him. Oh, that's fantastic.
yeah, the Hunger TV series, yes, if you wanted, like, a sexed up Twilight Zone, it with David Bowie delivering these sort of pseudo-profound monologues at the start of each episode, then sure, that's what you've got. I mean, it's a rather uneven series, and just like the movie, it's kind of style over substance most of the time, it must be said. It's funny I mentioned Highlander. Like, Tony Scott directed a few episodes of the TV series The Hunger, but most of the episodes were directed by Russell Mulcahy, the director of Highlander.
Cool.
But yeah, back to the movie, what we're here to discuss.
So many tangents. That's so interesting, though.
I guess the third reason that The Hunger is something of a guilty pleasure for me is I'm not sure where I stand with regards to the film's sort of representation of women and representation of queer culture. And I know that it's sort of praised and mocked in equal measure for, its depiction of lesbian vampire. Or bisexual vampires, I should say.
Yeah, I made a note, unexpected lesbianism. And I was like, gosh, I just did not see that coming. And I don't know if, like, I think maybe if there were hints of it beforehand, but for me, it just seemed to, come just out of the woodworks. And I was like, I even made notes. I've been like, oh my God, the sexy lesbian scene, boo. I don't know, just really unexpected. Like, I find everything with it, but just not what I thought was going to happen. And maybe that's a good thing, or I'm not sure. Because at that point, I had no idea where the story was actually going. But I mean, as a woman, I don't know. I think it was okay. I think it was sensual and tasteful. The boobs. I don't know. What do you think as a man watching that scene? What do you think?
I would like to think that there is enough emotional chemistry between Catherine Deneuve and Susan Sarandon. I didn't feel that it came out of nowhere, but that might be because I'd read the novel, and the novel sort of clearly establishes that for the character of Miriam Blaylock, she's sort of attracted more to the personality of various different people and tasted their blood. It doesn't really factor in whether they're male or female, and all the flashback sequences establish that she's had female lovers and male lovers.
Well, I don't think their relationship came out of nowhere. I mean, I don't think their attraction came out of nowhere. I just think it was that scene. I don't know, because there is clearly sexual tension, but I just
Well,
I was like, all right then, this is happening.
There's this debate as to whether the sex scenes in this film are so artfully composed and beautiful to look at that they're artistic, or whether it's just sort of gratuitous sensationalism, gratuitous titillation. This is one reason why I tend not to mention to people that I like The Hunger unironically, because I know a lot of people will say, oh, isn't that the movie with lesbian vampires or whatever? And it's unfortunate that's what it's sort of best known for. I actually like the way that the music that is used for the sex scene is the flower duet by Delibes. It's from an opera. I think it's called The Pearl Fishers.
Yeah.
And
I thought that was really, really good. It just worked. It was awesome. It seemed like her character, Susan Sarandon's character just was kind of stuck. She's trying to find more about these people, and she seemed like she was on, a quest in a way, and also her partner seemed dismissive of her, and it just didn't seem obviously he wasn't that important because he wasn't that important of a character. He wasn't there enough to learn more about him. So it seemed like she really was liking this strange woman with this current husband who is overseas. And I think it seemed like they had developed that kind of rapport and that friendship that can obviously lead to other things. And maybe that's the active.
I think it's also a part of the character that uh, Sarah, who's a scientist who is obsessed with sort of slowing down the aging process,
Yeah.
has conducted various sort of like borderline unethical experiments on animals to sort of, you know, do do this,
Mm,
develop a sort of, cure, if you like.
mm,
Then, like, she meets this woman who is basically the embodiment of her dreams, her objectives,
mhm.
sort of ageless. It's sort of, I think that's part of the attraction as well.
Yeah, I didn't think of that because maybe she's also attracted by the idea of her and the idea of, yeah, that this woman and that attraction leads to, like, a sexual attraction because maybe she's just so I don't know if I call her obsessive, she was curious and wanted to talk to, like, her and everything like that, but yeah, I guess that really that intrigue of this person who she doesn't know anything about kind of leads towards that kind of, I guess, sexual ideas and things like that. So, yeah, like, thinking about it now, it makes more sense.
Well, no, I'm just thinking that, both of these characters, yes, they're very attractive. Yes, Catherine Deneuve and Susan Sarandon at that time were both very beautiful women.
Mm.
Um, but the thing is that they're also very intelligent characters,
Yeah.
and they have they both have very clear goals in life that are independent of their relationships. They're very determined and kind of ruthless in pursuing those goals.
Mm.
And I don't know, these things make them interesting as characters. I feel that much of the way the film depicts their sexuality, it avoids being exploitative just because of, with Deneuve and Sarandon, just the sort of sheer force of personality that they bring to the parts and the sort of
Mm.
depth of intelligence they bring to the roles.
Yeah. And I really believed in their relationship. Like, I really believed that they were both attracted to each other, firstly, by their mind, that they were both intrigued by each other, know more about each other. And obviously, as the sexual chemistry kind of deepens, that doesn't negate the fact that as people has, yeah, like, a scientist and this apparent, collector of antiques or art, strange and worldly things. They are two people who are interested in knowledge and share that same passion. Yeah, like for knowledge, for knowing things, for discovery. So I think that also tied them together as you know, bringing more chemistry for them together, which is cool.
Hmm. At the time this movie was made, I suppose David Bowie as John, the disposable lover in this
Mm.
in this scenario was actually the biggest name in the cast, but it's probably the smallest role of the 3 in terms of screen time.
Yeah, that's what I was like. So when I watched this, I was like, oh, of this film, and I really thought that he played a much bigger role in this, but he doesn't. And it's more that he's there as a tool in a way. Like he's obviously he's great, and he actually made me think of someone who can just steal scenes even if they're not in very many of them. You have these people who win Oscars and they're maybe in it moves like 7 minutes or something. Um, but yeah, like I think as like also a group, they really worked well off each other.
Well,
Yeah, they were really good.
what is it they say? There are no small parts, only small players. Uh,
Yeah.
the character of John, who has this sort of, predatory menace, combined with a kind of sort of suavity, a kind of swagger that I get,
Mhm.
you know, David Bowie being this iconic rock star sort of brings to the part.
Mm.
But, there's also a kind of, deep sadness and melancholy to him that really comes through in the scenes where he's rapidly aging and sort of has a few flashbacks to, I don't know, the 19th century or something when he was, still young and first meeting the character of Miriam. Uh,
Mm.
it's sort of like he's not in the movie a lot, but, he really makes it count whenever he is on screen. You really do notice him. And
Yeah.
it's It's another one of those movies that sort of makes me realize how underrated David Bowie was as a dramatic actor.
Was so good.
He
Like, if I didn't know that he was mainly a musician, with a pop singer, I would think he was just an actor first. It was really good.
I guess the thing is that there was always a very theatrical element to his music, and a lot of the time he was, like, performing songs in character,
Mm.
some kind of, like, alter ego on stage. But the thing about Bowie was that he did a lot of acting in the 1980s. Like, the 1980s are a time that a lot of critics dismiss as when his music became sort of, I don't know, more synthesizer heavy, more sort of, poppy. But during that time, he was acting in a lot of, like, really artistically risky films. Like, as
Mm.
commercial as his music might have been during that time, his film choices were, like, really chancy. I mean,
Yeah.
there was The Hunger. I mean, he followed that up with Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, which was a World War II movie set in a Japanese prisoner of war camp, and they're focused on a sort of, I guess, homoerotic relationship between a British prisoner of war and a Japanese soldier.
Mhm.
Quite a profound work. It's probably David Bowie's best sort of, you know, acting work, a lot of people say.
Mm.
But during this time, he also did a bunch of other movies, Into the Night and Absolute Beginners, that developed a cult following. Labyrinth, of course,
Yeah.
which we discussed on this podcast as well, which became sort of iconic for sort of like
Mm.
younger people who grew up in the 80s like me. But also The Last Temptation of Christ, in which he played Pontius Pilate, and that's
Mm.
another thing where he was like only in it for like a scene, but you really remember his presence in that movie.
Yeah, like, he has a stage presence. And you know what I mean? As an actor, as someone who is theatrical, he has that stage presence and he just stands there, like, he comes onto the screen and it's like, wow, you really notice him. At least, that was for me as well, and obviously I knew he was in it and I knew who he was, but he still stood out that I would think if I didn't know who he was, I'd think, "Who is this person? This is a good actor." Like, he really imbibed the role and he really just made me think about his character, like, after I finished watching the movie. And I think that's really, really good for an actor to do that, especially with such a limited screen time. Like, it's just amazing. That's just pure talent.
A couple of other things that I think are worth mentioning is that his character plays the cello,
Yeah.
and I heard that, David Bowie sort of learnt how to play it so that he could sort of, it's still not him playing that you hear, it's still like, he's like miming to a recording, but at least it seems like he's like miming convincingly.
Yes, I had a mental note actually of, is he actually playing this? Like, I don't know if he played the cello. I'm not obviously like, I don't know anything about him and his abilities, but I didn't think he played the cello. Like, I didn't think he played the cello, but the way that he was doing it was very, very convincing. And I thought that was really good.
Well, there are enough like wide shots where you can
Yeah.
clearly see his full body and his hands moving on it that I actually begun to wonder. So I
Yeah.
actually had to look it up on the internet.
Yeah, I was really curious.
Well, the fact that I had to look it up and
Mm.
I couldn't tell, just at a glance, oh, he's faking it or whatever,
Mm.
said something. So he put in the work in that sense.
Yeah. I think of it, yeah, it was really good and very convincing, and that it really added that musical element to his character, added such a a softness to him as well, I think, and being like a music tutor, like that element made him, no, not like a scary vampire, but like just he just I think he became that kind of gothic archetype of this mysterious person, this soft quality to him, this musical ability. And I think, he just imbibed all those qualities and stood out so well.
And since I've talked about like the physical charms of Catherine Deneuve and Susan Sarandon, I should mention Bowie as well.
Mm.
There's just something, I don't know, he was never conventionally handsome, but he had a certain magnetism to him, and he just had these sort of odd physical features, like, well, his eyes being different colors and his sort of, you know, oddly shaped cheekbones or whatever. I mean,
Excuse me, he was a hottie. Okay? He was an A-plus hottie.
you're better qualified than me to like wax lyrical about this. So please tell.
Because he's so interesting to look at. I think that's what one of the things is. It's just like, where do you look? I think that's why he played this character so well. But, it's pretty hot.
Well, well, yes, you could watch it and swoon over Bowie. I can watch it and swoon over Deneuve, and I guess we're even in that sense.
Exactly.
But seriously, what you just said, where do I look? I think that's sort of my feeling about The Hunger is that I feel like each frame of this film is packed with so much visual gorgeousness, whether it's the gorgeousness of the actors or the scenery or some, you know, the way that certain scenes are lit, the play of light and shadow, just
Yeah.
or even when like you see the living corpses rising up from
Creepy.
from their coffins to assault Miriam, or whether you see John rapidly aging and deteriorating into an old man. Like the makeup effects, like there's just so much in every frame of this movie that just takes my breath away on a visual level that I sort of all of the issues that the script has, I kind of just let it slide.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking as well. It's so lavish and it's I think in other films, like, it might be too much, and I'm not sure if there's a criticism of this or anything like that, but, like, I just think, like, they obviously spent a lot of time working on this, like, figuring out, the set, the costumes, the design, all the pieces, like, everything that is in each shot, each frame to me seemed like there was something else to look at. And I think a few times that's why I paused. Like, as I mentioned, I paused and I'm like looking at stuff. So I don't know if that was a bad thing, but it was just so lavish. I'm trying to think of a word that is like encompassing all of this artistic style, this beauty, this gothicness to it. Um,
It's detailed. It's like
yeah, very detailed.
it's like a moving picture. I
Yeah.
actually think that is a cliche to say, but
Decadent.
when I watch a movie like this and I see like an individual frame where you could pause it and you could be like print it out and it'd be like a wonderful bit of wallpaper or something, or
Yeah.
then you could use as a screensaver just because it looks so pretty.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it has such decadence to it. And I think it's not something that you see in a lot of films. Like, a lot of things, films have really good scripts and everything like that. But to have such attention to background details is very remarkable. And it's very good for you to think that because it's like, but it's done in such a way that it didn't really distract me from what was happening. I was just curious. And it was like, how does this add to the characters? And I think I learned a lot about the characters by looking at everything around them and all the objects and decadent things and which I really liked and I think worked really well.
Well, I'm glad that it didn't distract you because
Right.
I know that is a common criticism of Tony Scott's films from, I guess, the mainstream critical fraternity is a lot of them find his sort of visual style so overwhelming that it just distracts from the story, distracts from the characters. And I don't know. I figured that in The Hunger, at least, it was in service of the story. And as I
Yeah.
say, in some cases, it sort of served to hint at hidden depths to characters that are only sort of really explored in the novel, and that
Yeah.
film can only sort of vaguely allude to.
Well, I found it very gothic and like so when I say gothic, I mean like the term gothic as in like has hidden depth to it. So, historical means of things as in like architecture and in fiction, hidden things in stories, like hidden mad women in houses. And that's what I mean by this. It was very gothic because there are so many little details, so many different stories being in there by all the little elements, all the little items, as I was saying before. And just that was telling a story as well. Like, all of these little things were telling stories of their own, which I thought was amazing, and this doesn't exist in a lot of other things. So, yeah, I can see why people didn't like it, but, because there are a lot of long shots on it, which people could think maybe those shots could be on something else to add more to the actual story arc. And it's clear that there probably could have been a bit more in it, but I'm quite happy to see all this kind of detail. Um, and it really made me appreciate, like, just the lavishness of items, you know what I mean? And history and, gothic things. So, yeah, it really worked for me.
Yeah. So you've pretty much articulated why I keep coming back to The Hunger. I mean, it's
Mhm.
not a perfect film, but it's such a trip. It's such like you can lose yourself in the atmosphere of it.
Yeah.
And just even though it's, set in a sort of urban contemporary environment for the most part, it has this otherworldly atmosphere to it.
Mm.
And maybe with the passage of time, that sense of, otherworldliness has persisted because the 80s, were a very different time in terms of like fashion, aesthetics, and technology and such.
Mm.
So it's now a period piece as well.
Yeah, it is. It's really weird to think of.
Well, yeah,
Um,
because in adapting the novel, they sort of emphasized what was then the contemporary aspects of it.
yeah.
It's now as much a period piece. The contemporary scenes are as much a period piece as the flashback sequences. What little of them that remain in the film.
Yeah. But, like, maybe that's what adds that romantic kind of element to it, as in, the idea of romanticism itself. And I think, yes, obviously it's clearly dated and period piece, but it doesn't, like, that didn't detract me, anything like that. I still thought this is a really well told story. Yes, I thought there were some flaws, but the flaws were minute compared to all these great details that I thought about it. And all these things that, yeah, could seem dated, but it doesn't really matter. Like, I really didn't think it mattered at all. Like, I still enjoyed watching it now, which was cool.
Well, as Voltaire said, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Yeah.
I will continue enjoying the goodness of The Hunger for years to come, I'm sure.
Yeah, me too, 'cause so many cool things about it. It was really awesome.
That's all for this week, folks. Thanks for listening. If you like what we're doing, please consider subscribing and sharing this podcast with your friends. If you have any questions or would like to provide suggestions for future episodes, you can send an email to fantasypodcastfeedback@gmail.com. Until next time, cheers.